And welcome to the Film of Science Podcast, a podcast where we are challenged with trying to articulate a love for art and storytelling. Today I'm joined by my sinning friend, Lucy.
Hello, everyone.
I'm glad everybody could join us today. Thank you, everybody, for being here, because today we will be talking about Ryan Coogler's 2025 release, Sinners. And I'm very excited to unpack this film with you here today because there's a little bit going on in this film, right? It's a very mixed bag. It's hard to tell where the film's going, what it wants to say. Is it successful when saying what it's trying to say? I love these characters like Slim and Sammy in this unpacking of something like blues music and what it means to communities and what it means to these people. When the film was opening up, I thought it was going to center more around the idea of what music really is, what blues music really is, and how it's just another form of storytelling that taps into something a little more primitive and invites these ideas like temptation, and they make you feel, certain ways, excited, angry, sad, and of course forces others to say things like the devil's work, just like video games cause violence, D&D's devil work, Pokemon's devil's work, right? It's more of the same, and I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of that kind of started with music way, way long ago. My favorite scene in the film, I will say, it's so small, but is when Slim kind of grills Sammy about, what do you know about blues music? You're a kid. And that's when I thought we were kind of tapping into what the film was ultimately going to be about, in that blues music isn't necessarily about any individual. It's about a community, about ancestry, about experiences happening now or have already happened. Of course, the film is kind of split into two parts. It kind of becomes something completely different when the vampires are introduced on some level. But I do think we lose sight of that completely, of what music means to people, what blues means to black people. The film starts to become a little too big for its britches. It's a little ambitious. We start to introduce generational discrimination, reparations, gatekeeping, gentrification, maybe. It's a pretty powerful film, especially in theaters, I think. And it's obviously very excellent. The rollout, the pacing, it's very excellent. It just gets a little in its own way, forgets, I think, to say anything by the end. But it's very cool, and I'm very interested in what you have to say about Sinners. What do you think about this movie?
Yeah, I saw the trailer for this movie, and I wanted to see it. It was an awesome trailer. I was not disappointed. The movie was perfectly set, perfectly casted, and I very much enjoyed this contrast in tone. I thought it was mixed very well. If you've been listening to us for a while, you know that I'm a fan of monsters. I have my preference for the larger ones, but vampires are cool too. And it's crazy to me how vampires in film represent so many things. They can represent immortality or sexuality, but they can also be super symbolic, like this movie. I like the idea of this vampires representing this parasitic nature of certain institutions. I thought it was such a fun way to express that. I also love the mesh and themes for this supernatural allegory we have going on. It makes sense to make the Jim Crow era in Mississippi supernatural. The African American and slavery history in the South, like Mississippi, like Alabama, like Arkansas, Georgia, is crazy. Anyone who's ever picked up a history book knows that some really awful stuff happened down here in the South during this time. And just how so much art came out of that era, so much self-expression through music, books, paintings, whatever, that it just made sense to mesh all this up together and put it in a film like this. And then you mix this type of history that we have down here with the lore, with the voodoo, the magic, the monsters. And I'm just really amazed how it blended so well. All of that is eerie. It's like watching those World War II movies and how that's one of the biggest, craziest things to happen in human history and how eerie that feels. The performances in this movie were great. Each and every single cast member gave it their all. I love that Michael B. Jordan played a set of twins. I love when this happens in film. I guess I'm thinking of that 1998 film, The Parent Trap, with Lindsay Lohan, where she also played a set of twins. And I guess as a kid, I thought that was the weirdest thing ever because Lindsay Lohan didn't have a twin, or at the time I questioned whether she had a twin or not. But that's just amazing how an actor can portray two different people while in that moment having to talk to themselves. I can't understand what kind of mindset you have to be in to do that. I thought that's awesome to include that. There were some moments where the film felt a little slow, but in all the good ways. It was visually beautiful. The score was great. The music was great. We have some horror elements sprinkled in throughout the film that I loved. All the jump scares got me, even though this isn't a traditional jump scare kind of movie. We had the blood, we had the gore, and I thought the entire concept of the film flowed really well. And I'm very glad we watched this. I would definitely recommend this film.
Yeah, I'm with you on the vampires being this end-all be-all for representation when it comes to monsters. They seem to represent everything if you can just make it so, which is really cool. And of course here it works perfectly because Dracula, besides Ozzy Osbourne, is the Prince of Darkness. And so having this Irish vampire kind of represent the pinnacle of evil on this march to, feed off of something like Sammy, someone who's so in tune with the past, present, and future. There's something powerful in that, even to someone like the Prince of Darkness.
To
right?
A powerful being, yeah.
It's awesome. It's obviously deeply inspired by Robert Johnson's time, and I think Clarksdale, Mississippi, too, where this takes place. And I'm sure Johnson's legend of selling his soul to the devil was inspired by something before him, too. So it's definitely a match made in heaven. And then it even goes as far as trying to merge this kind of natural gatekeeping that happens around art and communities, which is essential. Gatekeeping is essential to form anything that matters. So it lives in a really interesting space because it invites hate. It invites discrimination, appropriation, and appreciation. But it's also necessary to create something original. It's a legacy, right?
Right.
And so the vampires are a great choice. I guess zombies can maybe work too. Zombies aren't as sexy, I guess, literally, because they're kind of boring and they don't really do an awful lot. Vampires have more motivation, more free will, I guess.
And they have more isms.
Mm-hmm. So vampires, creating more vampires and kind of creating this homogenistic worldview is really cool. We start to gentrify and adopt, appropriate, appreciate, however you kind of want to look at it, something like blues music or black culture or whatever. So I love this kind of siloed off, insular focus of how culture operates with other culture. And it's really cool because obviously they even sort of acknowledge in the film that blues music doesn't start in Blues Town, right? It's inspired by the ancestry of blues people, different black communities, whatever. And their ancestry's music was inspired by different cultures and stuff like it. It changes over time, right? And so when does certain eras start and begin? And when does appropriation and appreciation kind of set in? And who was the first person to put a feather in their hood? But I love how tight focused it is in because it doesn't matter where it starts. It matters kind of where we are and what we want to protect. And so with all that said, really, it's super neat to see the vampires like want to siphon that power off. It's also neat that the head vampire guy is an Irish dude. I think a nod to the writer of Dracula being Irish, Bram Stoker. But I kind of want to read into that as Irish people being a group of people who were quicker in being adopted by America and not being discriminated against. And that generational hate and discrimination kind of looking for its dues to hate on another community because they were hated on. I thought this is where the film was going in the second half. And I thought in our epilogue we would see, kind of like how Daenerys said in Game of Thrones, the breaking of the wheel, the last spoke kind of being the bigger person and stopping the suffering and trauma. In that black people are now, present day, I guess it was like 1992 or whatever in the epilogue, are now in a position to discriminate freely without major consequence. And that they were going to choose not to, unlike the Irish did in the early 1900s when they were given the opportunity to do this freely without consequences like they would have 40 years earlier. We didn't go there. I thought there was going to be this kind of we're better than our historical brothers kind of thing. We didn't go there. But we also didn't really seem to go anywhere with Sammy being this kind of central focus. But I did want to bring up the point of this taking place in Mississippi. I like it when movies take place in the South. I like the geography of it. And I hate to say that we really didn't live in Mississippi to any degree. We see the rows of cotton, and maybe it's intentionally so, but we never seem to appreciate the landscape of the South.
Yep.
It almost kind of felt like it could have taken place anywhere other than the fact that it needed to be the Deep South, Jim Crow era, right?
Right. Even the town scene was rushed. We didn't get to slow down and see any of the Mississippi.
Yeah, especially, really the whole beginning, because it's just this breakneck speed of putting the team together, right? To do the heist, to run the juke. It's very cool. It is a little slow, but before you get sick of, who they're chatting with, we're kind of on to the next person to bring into the fold. I thought it was kind of slick that Michael B. Jordan was these two characters on two different missions, getting different groups of people together. I was like, oh, okay, we don't want to spend 3 hours with Michael B. Jordan going around getting all these guys together, so we're going to have Smoke and Stack, separate and do it themselves. But it's very cool. Their relationships with all these characters is very cool.
Yeah, even the church setting or even religion in general wasn't brought up as much as I thought it was going to be, especially with a title like Sinners. Starting the movie with Preacher Boy holding his guitar, his dad giving a sermon,
telling him to not play that music.
Exactly.
The devil's going to come get him, which he does.
And again, the setting of the South, the Bible Belt, right? It would have been nice to really drive that in visually.
Yeah, I almost wish we would have gotten so much more out of Sammy and his operation around this town, and in and out of this town with his dad. I guess I'm not sure how close Slim is to the town and how they're all mingled, but I would like for them to cross paths and have some kind of relationship, because Slim and Sammy are the stars of the show. At least they're little banters that they have. Slim is obviously the major star of the show. He's so good. Oh my god.
Yeah, clearly Sammy made a choice here at the end of the film by not letting go of the guitar when his father asked him to let go of it. And next scene we see is older Sammy still holding onto the guitar.
Yeah, it kind of makes me think that, yes, playing this music invites this kind of temptation, the so-called devil, into people's hearts, into Sammy's heart potentially, but it also gives him power over the evil. And if he was to let go of the guitar, he would be maybe even more susceptible to the life of sin. Because even in all of its failures in this movie, it does kind of feel like it lands on that no man's land of, yes, music that makes you feel something can invite, God forbid, the urge to express, thus inviting hate into your life by others. No one wants to see you express yourself. We're going to shut that up. And of course, the natural next action taken is to respond in any way really whatsoever. So you can kind of see the essence of what people mean when they say something like music invites the devil. It invites conflict. Conflict's not necessarily bad, obviously, because with conflict, obviously, there should be compromise. Because it's deeply ironic, especially maybe coming from the South, to hear things like D&D and Pokemon being demonic when these things were, at their very core, designed to bring people together. That's upsetting to some people.
Yeah, how many churches were upset down here with us that they were a Pokestop?
The church is supposed to bring you together, not your own inventions and vices, right? Which again, I love that the vampires are like they have this transcended kind of attraction towards Sammy. You know, more than smell, more than hearing. They, in one way or another, sense this thing Sammy is putting out into the universe, and it just draws them to it. It's very cool. And then we have this really, really neat sequence. I really am curious how you feel about it, where Sammy's playing in the bar, and the film then starts to transcend time and space. And we see music playing from the different corners of time and space too. It's such a powerful scene, especially happening kind of before the vampire stuff for the most part, that we really start to lock and load the major theme of the movie, in that music is a transcended form of storytelling. Makes you feel something else than a traditional story or movie, maybe. It's such a spectacle, the scene is, that I would have bet everything that the movie hinged on this completely. But we seem to lose sight of that as soon as the vampires arrive at the bar. What do you think of that scene, though?
Yeah, that was an awesome scene. I felt moved by it, watching it. Of course, the music helps elevate your feeling while watching this. I like the inclusion of all the styles, all the dances, and just how influential those have been to the present day. It did throw me off where we had that little small inclusion of the Asian couple.
Yeah, that's kind of central to one of my major problems with the movie.
It was like I don't know about that. Now you're trying to say something else by including them. And it sort of felt like this moment of inclusion for inclusion's sake.
Yeah, that was definitely a weird inclusion, especially on the back of this film kind of championing gatekeeping of cultures, of black culture. And then, of course, we have Mary kind of coming in out of left field saying, well, Sammy asks, he's like, what are you? Which is hilarious. And she's like, a human being or a person or whatever, which is a funny response because...
You wouldn't say that back then.
But then she says, well, I'm 25% black. I'm a quarter black. It's like, well, that's kind of weird. I get that we're kind of living in this gatekeeping scenario, especially literally inside the sawmill, right? We're kind of contained. But that rings exactly true as, I'm not racist, my best friend's black. Or my president's black. It's just like, that's irrelevant. Isn't it more important that Mary grew up alongside Smoke and Stack?
Well, I think that's what the intent was. Maybe the dialogue didn't help the intent. Because by Annie saying, well, she's family, makes you think, well, no matter what she is, she still grew up with us, so she's family.
But then they walk back on it and say, well, she's 25% black.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Maybe the dialogue didn't help any of that.
Sure. Because it almost felt like a really powerful moment in saying that our neighbors are more closely related than people who look like us from across the world or wherever, kind of thing. And I suspect that was especially true in the 1930s when the world wasn't as globalized.
Yeah, I think at the heart of the movie, that was there. Mary is one of us. She's always been one of us. But I can see how some of the interactions, especially that dialogue, made it sound not that way. Because even that inclusion with the Asian ancestry, Bo and Grace live in this Black community with us. They're part of this family. Let's show a part of their ancestry. They have, on some micro level, influenced the people in this town, especially being business owners.
Yeah, it'd be great to have seen some of that too.
Yeah.
Because they're living in a much more unique situation than probably anyone in town, where they're deeply in bed with the Black community while being first-generation Asian immigrants. I think she was Chinese. I think she said that.
Okay.
So seeing some of that flavor blend would have been really sick. But it was segregated completely because they were just, especially in that section where we see the people from different space and time, it's just their Asian ancestry, you know?
Yeah, maybe we should have gone forward in time and seen some K-pop and how that's been influenced that way.
Good call.
But I do understand the feeling that scene was supposed to bring, especially with the juke joint being the sort of sanctuary from the vampires, this kind of home. Which, by the way, my favorite scene in the entire film was when Cornbread got turned and he was trying to get in, and they were basically like, well, just come in if you're going to come in, you know? And he's like, well, I'm just waiting for y'all to invite me in. They're like, you've been in and out this whole time. Like, what are you talking about? It was so funny.
Yeah, the movie started to take a Scream vibe when Cornbread went down and stuff.
How did you feel about this duality that Smoke and Stack represent? Was the blue and red tie and attire solely there to distinguish them? Or was it a good versus evil sort of moment with one being turned into a vampire and one not being turned into a vampire? Is there something symbolic with them being twins, looking like the same person, maybe reflections of each other? Because there's something obviously being said with this color representation, at least I think. Red often represents fire, represents hell, and then the blue represents the sky, represents something celestial, representing heaven. And with Smoke dying at the end and seeing Annie and his newborn, and with the obvious Stack getting turned into a vampire, made me think there was something with good versus evil going on, but I'm not sure to what extent or to the overall point.
Yeah, it's a really good point. Maybe in priorities, because Smoke seems to be a little bit more of the humane character in all this. He's flexible with the people who live here who don't have the means to buy the corn liquor straight up. They have plantation money or whatever it is, right? He longs and laments for that relationship that he almost had with Annie and a child, right? A little bit more traditional, a little bit more human, a little bit more good, righteous, maybe. Stack was a little bit more of the gangster, right? He probably was a little bit more buddy-buddy with Capone. I think he was the one that was a little bit more likely to flex the money, I think, right? Maybe a little bit of a playboy type thing. And yeah, there's something kind of at odds with that, and I like how you put it with the heaven and hell stuff and the colors. Because Smoke feels much more low-key, too. He's a little bit more interested in taking care of the community, upholding that gate. And Stack is the one that's a little more tempted by breaching the gate and maybe on some level and kind of kneeling to the temptation of money. Who was it that kind of bent the knee at inviting the vampires in? It was Mary and Stack, right?
Yeah, Mary was the one that convinced him that, hey, maybe they have money on them. Maybe I can get that money and bring it here for you guys. And he's like, oh, great idea.
So yeah, there's definitely something to their duality and being somewhat inverse to each other. I will say one scene I really liked that dealt with the vampires was when they had turned, basically everyone, they're like frolicking, holding hands or something. Just like, oh, that's pretty funny to kind of, I think, based off of kind of what I'm saying, to ultimately represent the homogenized gentrification of, which I think is pretty on the nose, not in a bad way, a very pleasant way, very like visually kind of striking way.
Almost in a proud way.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It's almost like we're proud to show you this is what it kind of feels like happens when ideas merge too much. It's disturbing on some level. I guess it's literally disturbing because we have vampires, dancing around and stuff. But yeah, the representation of vampire here is very cool, no doubt. I wish we could have ended on a more vampiric note with Sammy and him being old and Mary and Stack show back up. It's weird because are you not the devil's pawns? You're vampires, right? But Sammy is untouchable because of the deal that Stack and Smoke made right before Stack was turned, right? Mm-hmm. Or finished off once for all, I think. Well, so Smoke thought. I guess the devil does make deals, and I think I've heard before that he can't go back on a deal. I think I've heard that. Maybe there's something to that.
Yeah, I don't know about devil stuff.
What do you think of the epilogue? What did it mean? What could it have meant if something else was included? Because it seemed pretty like we just need to show you where Sammy is.
Yeah, I guess to me, since Sammy didn't let go of the guitar in that church with his father and just took it and went with it and made a whole life out of it, he was okay with having a little bit of evil in his life. And maybe that's what invited the vampires back into his life, the evil back into his life. But since there wasn't any kind of good and evil religion set ideas, I don't know if that's exactly right to think.
No, it's a good point. Because earlier in the movie, I am kind of thinking the importance of, real artistry, real music that taps into something more. Living with that is an important part. You want to kind of live in that no man's land of something like, I guess, temptation, but you don't want to let it consume you.
Right.
It's kind of like that stupid movie you like with that guy and that girl. They both have cancer, and he puts a cigarette in his mouth, and he likes to live life right on the edge.
The Fault in Our Stars, ladies and gentlemen. That's the film.
It's not that bad. It's a decent movie.
The book is awesome.
But I guess by the end, we were in such a campy situation. I almost wish when Stack and Mary showed up to that bar in the 90s or whatever, there was some white dude or just non-black guy playing the blues, and then Sammy kind of being like, he's with me. Being like, we've adopted each other. And I'm going to represent the larger person here and not let generational discrimination happen anymore, at least on Sammy's watch. And that would have helped tie in the Irish being the vampires, causing all this mayhem, and then kind of expecting Sammy in his older ages, when he's in a position of moderate power where he can commit some kind of discrimination, but he doesn't. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and to me, it was just more of the embrace of this life, of the sin, I guess. He went to Chicago, where Smoke and Stack made all this mayhem in.
That's true, yeah.
Where they told him not to go. He doesn't belong there. Almost like I'm accepting this life of being a bad boy.
Well, it kind of ties in the title to some degree, where it may be a little bit of JC, where it's necessary for us to live a life of sin, to live in that realm of temptation and to give in occasionally. And then Stack and Mary showing up, it's like, you've been committing some crazy sins lately. You want to join us?
We've been watching you.
Sammy's like, nah, have my fair share, but we good.
but don't take that temptation too far. I'm good.
Yeah, I wish we could have focused a little bit more on Sammy. And Slim, of course, but I love that everyone died, I will say, too. But all right, man, thank you very much for talking about this movie and watching it with me. That was very insightful. I was already pretty high on this movie, but I think I'm a little higher. There's a lot of fun to have had in this movie, I think, at the very least. It's very ambitious, but it's good.
You're welcome. I'm glad we got to watch this at the movie theater.
Do you have a budget guess?
I'm going with 28 mil. I guess I'm putting it more towards the horror side. It is 2 hours and 18 minutes, so I bumped it up a little bit. It looks amazing. We had a few sets, so I'm not confident in my budget guess.
Well, it says here that it was $90 to $100 million.
Holy crap.
Very expensive, just like every movie today. But it's gone on to make $87 million.
Okay.
So it'll probably do all right for itself. And over on Letterboxd with 484,000 people, I don't think they all went to the theater. They weighed in at a 4.3.
Wow.
Super high.
That's super high. I'm going with a 3.5. Awesome watch. Awesome experience. I didn't feel like I got a big so what out of it.
Of course.
Love the gore. Love the characters. Love the vampirisms. But there wasn't a big emotional impact for me. There wasn't a gut-wrenching moment. It didn't offer much more than fun and some pretty thoughtful, insightful things, but no aftermath of them.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you almost completely. It's a very ambitious movie. Too big for its britches. But it pulls it off. It's kind of like how some of these guys would wear suits in the 90s and look like they were wearing their dad's suits. Some people could pull it off. Most people look kind of silly. This movie pulls it off. It's great. It's one of those movies I need to kind of remind myself that it's okay to have fun and that be kind of the backbone of why you enjoy something. But there's a lot to love here outside of it being a lot of fun. But it is a lot of fun, and there's a lot of really cool sequences.
Yes.
And not just that music sequence where Sammy's playing in the bar and they transcend space and time stuff. There's way more cool things outside of that.
I definitely agree.
But yeah, man, thank you very much again, and thank you guys for listening to this episode of the Filmsteins. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Remember, we post every Wednesday and Friday on patreon.com/Filmsteins. And YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all the free feed places that you listen to podcasts. Our next episode will be on the war movie, I think. It's called Warfare. It just came out. Alex Garland co-directs with another man. I can't remember his name.
Alex Garland directed Civil War?
Yeah.
All right. I'll watch it.
Yeah, he makes very interesting movies. I don't like his movies very much, but they're very interesting. I'm waiting for one to pop off. I don't know if he's ever gonna, make something I really like, but we'll see. So look forward to that. That will be very fun. Go check out our Civil War podcast. That's a interesting talk. Remember to leave nice comments, thoughts, and ideas on our Patreon as well. Come subscribe. Come request a film. Thank you guys very much. But until next time, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And that's a wrap for today's episode of the Filmsteins. Thanks for tuning in and joining us on our cinematic journey. We hope you enjoyed the discussion and gained some new insights and perspectives on the world of movies. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform, especially Patreon at patreon.com/Filmsteins, and follow us on social media for more film-related content. We love hearing from our listeners, so if you have any feedback, suggestions, movie recommendations, or book recommendations, please feel free to reach out to us. Until next time, keep watching and keep loving the magic of movies. This is the Filmsteins signing off.